Welcome to MinMax. Today's video was recorded in front of a live studio audience. Today I am speedrunning Hollow Knight, but this is no ordinary any percent run. No, my friends, this is going to be a low percent speedrun. The speedrun that aims to complete the game doing as little as possible. It begins, as every good story does, by falling from a great height from an unknown place. I start by running through King's Pass, making sure to pogo enemies and objects to make it that I don't need to jump quite as frequently, and make certain areas slightly faster, before I am met with a fairly large door. Fortunately, I'm not above vandalism, so I smash that thing to bits and proceed to Dirtmouth. As I approach, I begin jumping, otherwise my knight would slow to a walk out of deference to the Elderbug, but that's not fast enough. So I blitz past the old man and throw myself down the well on the outskirts of town to begin my run properly. As I enter the ruined crossroads of a once flourishing kingdom, I immediately jump in a hole to kill the husk of a villager and steal the small pile of money he was guarding. Money management is going to be an integral part of this run, and I need to start early. I then arrive in a small arena with a little bug floating in the center of the room. I swiftly dispatch this enemy and prepare for the two that follow. I jump onto a platform and aim to hit a stalactite into both enemies as they spawn, but due to my personal ineptitude, I only manage to hit one. I leave the arena, making sure to loot the corpses of my fallen foes, and make one last stop to steal some more geo, making sure that I am holding at least 50 so that I can activate the forgotten CROSSROADS stag station. With that, I finally arrive at my first boss, the False Champion, worth a whopping 1%. I ready my nail and smash the gargantuan enemy's armor until he staggers and falls, revealing his gooey center. After dealing enough damage, he enters his second phase, smashing his mace repeatedly into the ground. I steal my resolve, wait, and break the wall beside me and run away. The False Knight lives for another day, and I remain at 0% completion. Fleeing this arena, I run into a snail shaman's hut, where he endows me with a spell. Let's quickly pause to explain how this run actually works. When you finish the game, it awards you with a percentage score ranging from 0 to 112%. Weird, I know. And acquiring certain items and beating certain fights each add to this score. For example, I previously mentioned that the False Knight was worth 1%. The spell that I have just acquired, Vengeful Spirit, is also worth 1%, but it is indispensable for completing this run. Now, nothing in this world is free, and the Snail Shaman wants me to engage in a little bit of pest control, so I rush through the Ancestral Mound, unsuccessfully attempting to avoid all the enemies, until I arrive at my target, an Elder Boulder. This enemy has a ridiculously thick shell that it hides in when I approach, and it cannot be penetrated by a nail. So I am meant to wake it up, retreat, and fire 4 Vengeful Spirit fireballs straight into its face. Unfortunately, in my rush, I forgot the first step. So my first 2 attacks bounce harmlessly off its shell. This meant that I had to kill several of its children to charge more soul and finally finish it off. With this complete, I now head towards Green Path, briefly stopping to kill another Elder Boulder with a glitchy fireball. I then perform something called a fireball skip. This is where you fireball in midair to briefly cancel your falling and use the recoil of the fireball to make jumps that would be too far otherwise. These skips are the sole reason that Vengeful Spirit is a requirement for this run. Now, Green Path is where, in a normal playthrough, I would defeat Hornet in a duel and acquire the Mothwing Cloak. This would, however, give me 3% completion, 1 for Hornet and 2 for the Cloak. So instead, I opt to ignore that completely. I guess I'm walking. Instead, I traverse deeper into Green Path and head through Fog Canyon, making sure to fully charge my soul gauge before arriving at the Queen Stag Station. This is where I prepare for the hardest fireball skip in the run. Previously, I used a single fireball. This time, however, I must chain 3 consecutive fireballs. I run across the platform, perform the biggest jump that I can, then fail to turn around, completely messing up the skip. So I quickly leave, recharge my soul, and return. This time, there isn't a single moment of hesitation. I flawlessly perform my 3 quick turns and gracefully land on the other side, entering the fungal wastes. Now, before I rush through this area, I make a quick detour into a little room littered with enemies that spit homing bombs at you. I navigate through this perilous gauntlet to pick up a Hallow Nest seal located at the top. This item doesn't give any completion progression, but it can be sold for 450 geo later down the line, and I am going to need a lot of money for future purchases. I then keep running, pausing to flawlessly destroy 2 large mushrooms blocking my way until I approach what appears to be an insurmountable wall. Fortunately for me, one of those bomb-spitting enemies is right above me, so I lure one of those bombs down, line myself up perfectly, wait for the bomb to start fuming, and pogo the explosion, failing to get enough height. And then I fail. And I fail. And I fail. And I fail again. This time, I take a deep breath, climb back up to the monster, and make the biggest jump of my life. Successfully pogoing the explosion twice and gaining just enough height to make it through. Now I arrive at the Mantis village. This area houses the next item that I would need to make any amount of progress. The Mantis Claw. Worth a whopping 2%, this item gives me the ability to jump up walls, allowing me to reach new heights. So I unlock the door blocking my way to the claw and attempt to pogo my way back up using the Mantis Youth. But one obstinate youth decides to stand between me and my goal, and I am knocked straight back down. So I set up for my backup, trying to ride the Mantis Youth back up, and fall just short. Failing that, I try my next backup, and fall. Finally, after accidentally taking a mantis for a short walk, I successfully managed to complete my second attempt at my first backup, picking up the Mantis Claw and reaching 3% completion. Leaving the way I came, I break open a hidden path within a wall, deliberately stand on a pitfall trap, and head into Deep Nest, the dank, dark pit full of scuttling spiders and other creepy things. I carefully navigate the maze-like environment until I can make it into the one safe place in the entire area, the hot springs. I quickly sit at the bench to set my spawn point, and after only a brief rest, I continue my journey. Then, if you thought that the Deep Nest couldn't get any worse, I enter the dark zones. Usually, in order to explore the Deep Nest, the knight would require a lantern to enable him to actually see what is going on around him. Instead, I am blindly running through almost pitch darkness. Through trial and error, I have learned that I can immediately drop down 3 ledges before performing a short hop at the end of the 4th to gracefully avoid all spikes. Another few hops, and I encounter a fork in the road. This time, my path is taking me straight up, where I am immediately ambushed by enemies I couldn't possibly see. But I ignore them and continue into the next room. This section has more climbing and many more spikes and enemies to contend with, so I elegantly weave through the narrow corridors, avoiding most enemies, before I make it into the failed tramway, where I acquire the tram pass. This is not worth anything completion-wise, but it allows me to travel to other areas of the map much easier. Using a save and quit warp, I appear back at the Deep Nest hot spring without having to backtrack manually. I then move back to the fork encountered earlier and opt to take the left path this time, immediately falling into spikes and warping right back to the start of the room. See, in Hollow Knight, falling into an environmental hazard would typically warp you back to the last safe area that you stood. In the dark, however, there are no safe spaces, and I get warped right back to the load zone. So I make my way through for a third time, making sure to avoid the spikes and another unseen enemy, before making my way into another, somehow even worse room. With zero hesitation, I breeze past the spiders, deftly avoid the crumbling floors, and complete the precise platforming with a zero visibility. I then escape the darkness and make it into the distant village, where I have to make a super precise jump. By jumping off the ledge I'm standing on, wrapping around to hang onto the wall, and wall jump to get just enough distance for wall kick off another tiny platform and land safely on top. This is a daunting jump, and I am suspended over a very large drop. But this drop has nothing that it can do to harm me. I just land safely in the water below. The catch is that while I'm safe in the water, I have no way to get back up. So I begin the jump, land on the wall, decide it wasn't good enough, panic, second guess myself, cling to the wall, too low this time, try to correct, fall. And here I had to think, do I give up? I mean, what's the point of trying? But no, I must persevere for no reason other than spite. So I save and quit and warp back to the hot springs. My journey back was not quite as smooth as the first time, but eventually I made it back, and this time I made that jump look easy. It really is amazing what overthinking can do to a person. So I platform up to the stag station, and with 324 geo, I have more than enough to unlock it. allowing me to travel to the forgotten Crossroads station opened so long ago. This time, I take a different path through the Crossroads and head towards the tram which I can take to the resting grounds. This is where the dreamers want me to complete even less of the game by pleading for me not to break their seals and trapping me in the dream realm. But after some slightly tricky parkour, I escape from this realm with 1 more % to my name, as I have acquired the dream nail. So I'm now at 4%. I awake at the feet of my savior, the seer, someone who has spent her entire life preserving the dream nail, who has grand ambitions to use me to destroy the Radiance and atone for the sins of her clan. But before she can explain all this, I vanish and return to my bench in the deep nest none the wiser. After waking up on my bench, I actually take a new path, heading right out of the hot springs and making my way towards another tram, riding it to the ancient basin, which I quickly skip through as there's literally nothing interesting to do here. Making my way into a dilapidated elevator shaft, I scale the walls, pogoing off the head of one unruly guard to make it into the City of Tears, where this run gets truly painful. See, in order to reach the Watcher Knights, this game wants to check that you have the double jump ability. But that thing gives progression and there ain't no way that I'm about that. But this jump just does not seem doable. Well, except for the fact that this game only checks for the wings once. Because I mean, how could you lose them after making the jump? And fortunately, this game just happens to have some scenery in the background. Scenery that you can actually pogo to get just enough height to fake the check. So after a quick safety bench, because I do not trust myself to first try the Watcher Knights, and fumbling through literal pitch darkness, I make my way into the first actual required boss fight. Though not before taking the coward's way out and killing a knight early. You may remember the Watcher Knights from your casual playthrough as the bit where the difficulty gets turned up to 11. Well, it is somehow 1,000,000 times worse when you have the base nail and almost no movement abilities. So I brace myself, straining my mental abilities to their absolute limits, making sure to duck and weave through the unpredictable attacks of the two knights, over one attack, under the next, pogoing this guy and dodging this guy, before I eventually fall. Surely I'll only screw this up once though, right? No, not at all. You thought I was good at this game? My handle is literally inept. But you know the saying, 3rd time's the charm, right? So I walk into the room confidently, and finally become the gamer my mum always knew I could be, and absolutely beat the heck out of the bosses, showing them what for. I certainly didn't come close to dying against the last knight, who is literally the easiest to heal against. After my hard-fought victory, I climb to the resting place of Lurien the Watcher and enter his mind with the Dream Nail, eating his ghost to death and absorbing his soul, leaving with 6% completion, netting 1% each for the Watcher Knight fight and for Lurien himself. During my descent, I briefly pause to raid a chest and pick up another Hallowness seal, because I can't stop that old money grind, before introducing myself to Lem, the sucker who was about to fill my pockets with Geo. I sell these seals for way more than you would expect, considering I literally just found them on the ground, and begin leaving the city, but not before making a quick pit stop at this random house absolutely teeming with husks. I quickly slip into a small hole in the wall and kill the gorgeous husk inside, earning myself a cool 420 Geo, and finally giving me enough to buy something that I honestly could have used about 20 minutes ago when I was fumbling around in the deep nest, the Lumafly lantern. After finally making my way out of town, I perform what is easily the coolest trick in the run, Dashless Blue Lake, and make my way to this nondescript house, rescuing the shopkeeper Sly before returning to Dirtmouth and purchasing myself the aforementioned lantern, and making sure to sit at the bench. From here, I head towards Crystal Peak to earn my last movement ability for the run, the Crystal Dash, which is worth another 2% completion. Entering the Crystal Peaks requires the Lumafly lantern, as you cannot unlock the gate without it, but platforming through this area is actually pretty easy, up until the parkour section that allows you to get the Crystal Dash. See, usually at this point, you would be expected to have the regular dash ability, but you know, that adds to my number. So firstly, I need to do a fireball skip. I use all 3 of my charges, but technically 2 is enough. Secondly, I need to traverse a gauntlet of laser beams, running across conveyor belts suspended over the void. In a normal playthrough, this is literally the most trivial challenge to exist. Dash makes short work of this non-OSHA compliant workplace. But without it, this becomes a whole bunch more perilous. I have to precisely time my jumps to weave between the beams and land on the platforms at the absolute maximum jump distance, and each failure is agonizing as my healing capabilities are non-existent in this area. So I make it to the second conveyor, to the jump that has killed a fair few runs. See this platform? This is ever so slightly too far away to make with a regular jump, and I have to utilize a solution previously used in the distant village. A solution that I messed up. I need to jump off the ledge, wall grab at the top of the conveyor, and use the slight distance I have gained to clear this daunting gap. Well, spoiler alert, I panicked and fell. Psych, you thought. No, today I enter gamer god territory, easily making the jump and making past me look like an absolute cretin. I quickly abscond with the crystal heart and walk back to Dirtmouth, 2% better. From there, I am in the final stretch. You might think that since it's taken me 50 minutes and I've only gotten one dreamer, that there's still a bit left to do. But you'd be a fool to think that. From Dirtmouth, I book it to this little room with a nice little acid lake. But now is not the time to be taking in the sights. Instead, I throw myself off a ledge and aim to wall cling above the acid using the crystal dash. After charging, I float just above the surface of the acid before quickly wall jumping at the other side to make my way back into Fog Canyon. It's a short and boring run that I definitely did not almost die in to get to the teacher's archive, home of Monomon the teacher. I take another quick safety bench before barreling into Umu's arena, the last hurdle barring my way to the second dreamer. This fight is not my favorite. Umu is completely impervious to damage while in its expanded form. Inflated? Anyway, Umu will do 2 or 3 attacks, which are usually fairly easy to deal with, before my man Quirrell comes along to save the day and burst Umu's bubble, allowing me to deal some damage. Now, I said Umu's attacks are usually pretty easy to deal with, but I was throwing so hard and having numerous close calls with death that eventually I made it through alive. So I continued to Monomon's container before dream nailing Thin Air, as I forgot that Quirrell needs to come along to allow me to actually hit Monomon. I then enter the dream realm yet again and absorb some more essence, weakening the seal once more and getting myself to 10% completion. After a brief nap on the floor, I left the archives and headed to the Queen's Station, where I unlocked my final stag station and made my way towards Hera the Beast, deep in the distant village. After entering the main hall of the village, to be honest I think this is a bar, I received a warm welcome from the locals before waking up in the dingiest place yet, the Beast's Den. After freeing myself from the web, I ran through the area and slowly killed these masked guys. I don't know the name. After swiftly dying to the first one before realizing I can just jump him, I easily skipped the second guy before being forced to murder the third. Anyway, despite how much I dislike these enemies, they are way easier to kill than Umu or the Watcher Knights. So I easily dispatch of this final hurdle before doing to Hera what I did to the others and opening the final lock on the black egg, bringing me to 11%. From here, there is nothing to do but to kill the titular Hollow Knight. So I return to Dirtmouth and dash right into the Hollow Knight's chamber, briefly pausing to sit on the bench inside for safety. I then rush into the final room and free the Hollow Knight from his restraints, before finally confronting the tragic husk of a once mighty hero. As he is released, he screams in anguish, and our bloody confrontation begins. We exchange a flurry of blows as I swing my pathetic base nail against this mighty foe. Everything is looking good as I deftly avoid almost every attack, but then nerves set in. I panic and fail, and I am swiftly cut down. But no matter, I became a god gamer not 20 minutes ago, remember? Surely this time. Nope. Undeterred, I enter for a third time. Lucky number 3, and I get absolutely demolished. What, you thought I was good at this game? My handle is literally inept. Wait, I already used that one. Anyway, long story short, I died so close to the end during attempt 4. I don't even want to talk about attempt 5, but I will. I died. So on to attempt 6. Now, I want to stress that this is the worst I ever did in this fight in these runs. Like, do you know how embarrassing it is to take damage from a stationary boss that is actively hurting itself in order to aid you? I was getting dangerously close to having my God Gamer certification revoked, but I walked in and really began to focus. We had a vicious back and forth. I would take damage and heal, only to take damage again. But eventually, I prevailed. Absorbing the final goo from the Hollow Knight, the screen cuts to black, and I am done. So what was my final score? Well, we know it's a minimum 11%, but it all depends on what the Hollow Knight is worth. So we wait for the game to finally reveal the answer. 11%. So it turns out that the Hollow Knight clearly isn't actually that important because he doesn't even add to my final score. But with that, I am done. Now, as usual, please make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below telling me what a wonderful person I am. If you enjoyed this video, perhaps you'd enjoy this one too. It's literally the only other thing on the channel, so check it out. See you next time. Hey everyone, today we're going to be playing the least Hollow Knight possible. So I start the game on normal difficulty because I'm not very good. Holy shit, ladies and gentlemen, we have done it! We have played the absolute least Hollow Knight humanly possible. Let's go!